Hello everyone, my name is Gianna, and back in January I was diagnosed with hypothyroidism. I made my first video then for this series called Hypothyroidism, Now What? Where I talked about how I modified my diet and different things I was doing that were helping me to feel better. Well, I'm happy to report today, several months later, that a couple of months after filming that, I finally met with an endocrinologist or a specialist, and he told me that I only had subclinical hypothyroidism. In layman's terms, that basically means you have hypothyroidism, sort of. It's a very mild case. While I still displayed many of the symptoms, medication was not necessary. He did tell me that some doctors might prescribe medication anyway, but because it wasn't necessary, he encouraged me to keep doing the things I was already doing. So, as of that time, I have lost 11 pounds. It was 13. I like to keep it real, but I started cheating again on my diet. People were complimenting me on how I was looking and how I was feeling, saying they noticed a positive change, which meant so much. Thank you if you're one of those persons that encouraged me. So I started thinking, oh, I can cheat a little bit. The endocrinologist even said, everything in moderation. What you're doing is good. Keep doing it. And when I started cheating, I immediately gained a couple of pounds again. Now, it's normal to fluctuate, but I have about 10 to 15 more pounds to go to be in a healthy place. So I'm halfway there, and we're going to keep going. One of the things I've missed the most in cutting gluten out of my diet is bread. I love bread. I finally had gluten-free pasta the other day for the first time since January because I was being very strict about my diet in the beginning. Because I've missed bread so much, I decided to start a cooking show that I am calling Baking with Hypothyroidism, where I'm going to try out some different hypothyroid-friendly desserts so that we can maybe have our cake and eat it too, so to speak. So this is the first one. Welcome to the show. None of these recipes are my original recipes. I may modify a few of them a little bit, but I will let you know. This first recipe that I'm going to make is for a coconut flour loaf bread. So I'm going to use my loaf pan that I've baked many a loaf of bread in. And of course, we will include a link to the original recipe when we post the video in the comment area. You'll be able to see it, so you can make this at home too. I haven't made it before, so on this show I want to try out new recipes, see if they're successes or they're flops, and I want to encourage those of you that also struggle with thyroid problems that we can still have healthy, sweet treats that taste just as good, that don't wreak havoc on our bodies. A couple of staples that you should have in your pantry or cupboard is coconut flour. Of the flours I've tried that are gluten-free, almond flour, tapioca flour, and coconut flour is my favorite. I feel like the pancakes I've made with it, the breads I've created with it, have been nice and fluffy, similar to regular flour consistency, not exactly the same, which we'll see more later. Another staple, coconut oil. I talk about this in my first video, which you can look up, Hypothyroidism, Now What? The importance of this magical coconut oil. Thanks to warehouse stores like Sam's, I was able to buy what feels like a lifetime supply of it. Outside of that, you will need raw honey. The recipe calls for sea salt. I'm using iodized salt just because iodine helps give us a little boost that we need. Baking soda, eggs, and apple cider vinegar. So again, very simple, just a few ingredients are needed for this recipe. So let's get started and see if this is a success or a bust. 1/2 cup of coconut flour in the bowl. We are adding all of our ingredients in the very beginning, minus the apple cider vinegar and the baking soda. 1/4 cup coconut oil, which is in this nice jar. Thanks to its size, I can just scoop it out. 1/4 cup. By the way, extra virgin coconut oil smells absolutely delicious. So there's my 1/4 cup. Then I need 1 egg and 6 egg whites. A tip I read about when making this recipe that helps make your bread a little more fluffy is to mix the egg whites by themselves. So I'm going to try to do that. Since this is my first time making it, I don't really know what to expect, so I kind of need all the help I can get. So I will crack my 1 egg, and then I will separate my other eggs, because in addition to the 1 egg, we need 6 egg whites. You can use an egg separator to separate your yolk from the white. I like to sort of go back and forth, just using my eggshells to separate the egg whites from the yolk, as you can see here, so that I just end up with egg whites in my bowl. Some people use egg separators. I have one of those, but this was just quick and easy right now. I've had people ask, what can you do with the egg yolk? You can have breakfast with the egg yolks the next day. I've heard you can make custards with them, which I haven't tried, but they don't have to go to waste. I'm mixing the egg whites separately to see if that helps. What this is supposed to help with is the rising of the bread. Since this does not have gluten or yeast or anything like that, you don't want to go into the recipe expecting that it's going to be, you know, really big slices of bread and that it's going to create a really high rise inside your bread loaf, because it doesn't have any of those things. But I've heard that mixing the egg whites by themselves will help with the process. So I've actually never done it separately like this, but we're going to see if it does help. So once I've mixed those by themselves, I see some bubbles forming. I'm gonna mix them a little longer. And then I will dump the egg whites in with the rest of the ingredients. Calls for 2 to 4 tablespoons of raw honey. My family and I like things to be sweet, so I'll probably do the 4 tablespoons of raw honey. 1/4 teaspoon salt. As I said, it calls for sea salt. I'm using regular iodized salt. The iodine is good for those of us that have thyroid problems, hypothyroid problems. So I'm going to mix these ingredients together. I'm just using a wooden spoon. I'm going to mix them by hand. So 1/2 teaspoon baking soda here. And then 1/2 teaspoon apple cider vinegar. Just going to work my biceps here. This is also a good staple to have in your home, apple cider vinegar. You can read about the many benefits of that. As you can tell, it's already fizzing. It's kind of fun. This might be a good recipe to bake together with your children. And I'm just going to mix it really well. And I'm often surprised when I make these gluten-free recipes at how small the quantities are, though I read about it. Because I'm so used to baking with regular flour and real sugar and ingredients like those, and I'm used to bigger quantities, it always seems like a small amount to me. If you want more, you can always double the recipe. But as you can see, there's a small amount of dough. It looks good and mixed together. So I'm gonna go ahead and grease my bread loaf pan and put that in there next. And I'm also just using some coconut oil. We've loved the many uses of coconut oil. We've substituted it in many recipes for butter, simply because we didn't have butter on hand. And it's worked really well, and you can't taste the difference in the recipes we've substituted it with so far. My pan is nice and greased, And now I will take my dough and put it in there. You'll notice that it kind of sticks together. It's a little clumpy, so I'm going to spread it out. That's normal. You haven't done anything wrong. Again, there's a learning curve when baking with ingredients that do not have gluten or yeast in them and making bread. The oven is set to 350 degrees. So we're going to let this bake for about 45 to 50 minutes. I will check it at the 45-minute mark just to be safe. So we'll see how this turns out. I just want to share a brief update for those of you who were praying for me and my health. On January 8th, I went into the gynecologist's office because he had drawn some routine labs, and that's when he told me that I had a hypothyroid. That same day, he drew more specific labs to check my T3, my T4 hormones, and other hormones that affect the thyroid and are affected by the thyroid. And he sent those results to the endocrinologist. I did not meet with the endocrinologist until about March 2nd. And what was amazing was within that time, I made my first hypothyroidism video. Hypothyroidism, now what? I modified my diet, and I was just very careful and increased my level of activity because I didn't want to be placed on medication and I didn't know what was going to happen. Well, when I spoke with the endocrinologist, he officially diagnosed me with subclinical hypothyroidism. Now, what's so fascinating is those second round of labs were taken the exact day that I was told I had a hypothyroid. The endocrinologist told me that oftentimes your thyroid will fluctuate a little as a woman in your mid-30s with children. But what's important is the T3 and T4 hormones, and those were more than within range for me, which is why he decided not to put me on medication. So I thank you so much for those of you who prayed. I'm still being careful. I'm still trying to change my lifestyle and taking my family along with me, and it's been a great adventure. It's not over, but I do feel like I'm in the process of being healed. I'm still praying about things and experimenting and seeing when I feel good and when I don't feel good. More times than not, I have good days and no longer bad ones, though there are still hard moments. The moment of truth, I rechecked the recipe, and it actually says to bake for 40 to 50 minutes. So I checked it at about the 42 mark, and it is lightly browned on top, as you can see. So I'm going to let it sit out for about 10 to 15 minutes while we have supper, and then we'll see how it slices up and how it tastes. I have officially started slicing the coconut flour loaf bread. I'm going to taste it. I let it bake for about 42 minutes. I was cooking supper while it was baking, which I don't recommend. So when I make it again, I'll probably take it out at the 40-minute mark. I'm going to taste it. It's nice and moist. You want to try it, Felicity? And it tastes sweet and coconut-like. The children would like to try it. That's always a good test. What do you all think? They'll be honest. They love bread, just like their parents. So, a few things. It's good. I like it. You can probably eat it with jam on top or spread some more honey over it. I could see myself having it for breakfast, or when someone gives us delicious but gluten-filled treats, I could have something like this instead to satisfy my sweet tooth. I used a bread loaf pan. If you want it to be a little higher, I would maybe use a bread pan half this size, which I don't currently own but will be investing in. So all in all, I would call it a success. The children like it. I like it. I think the hubby will like it. So thank you so much. I'm so thankful, and I will see you soon. Bye-bye.